This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans! It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. The 1980s was a great time to be a fan of tag team wrestling, but few teams captured the excitement of tag team wrestling and the hubris of the 1980s like Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at Life in the Fastlane, the story of the dynamic duo Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. While the 1980s is often associated with the rise of the WWF, several promotions were doing quite well for themselves, particularly Fritz von Erichs' World Class Championship Wrestling. Some wrestling historians believe World Class might have become a national promotion had Fritz opted to expand it earlier than he did. While that's a debate we'll save for future consideration, Von Erichs' World Class promotion was crushing it on many levels, including ticket sales, brand awareness, and television exposure. World Class Championship Wrestling was built around the promotion's family of babyfaces, the Von Erichs. Kevin, Kerry, Mike, and David portrayed rugged heroes who were easy on the eyes for female fans and who represented the toughness that Texans like to pride themselves on. However, as every wrestling fan knows, a promotion's heroes are only as good as its villains. In World Class's case, Von Erichs never wanted for strong heel opponents. NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nature Boy Ric Flair was a recurring threat who presented the Von Erich boys with a chance at wrestling's most coveted prize when he came to town. While the fabulous Freebirds, Michael Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Buddy Roberts, proved to be a persistent threat for years. Indeed, the Freebirds vs. Von Erichs program took World Class Championship Wrestling to unprecedented heights. So much so that World Class might have succeeded as a national promotion had Fritz capitalized on the feud's momentum from 1982 to 1984. Although the Freebirds are often considered the Von Erichs' biggest rivals, the team of gentlemen Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez proved a powerful force as well. Known as a dynamic duo, this heel team made life miserable for the Von Erichs and provided fresh opponents besides the Freebirds. Interestingly, this was the second version of the dynamic duo, more on that in a bit, but it was the most successful in terms of exposure and overall heat. With a career dating back to 1973, Gino Hernandez, aka Charles Eugene Wolfe Jr., was born into the wrestling business. Gino was brought up by wrestler Luis Hernandez and began training with Jose Lothario. Hernandez wrestled in Southeastern Championship Wrestling, teaming with and eventually turning on Jose. While Gino's good looks made him a viable candidate for a babyface, he proved much better as a heel. A talented grappler, it was easy for him to play a cocky heel. Hernandez perfected his craft in different territories and had a bright future. A team with Tully Blanchard and Southwest Championship Wrestling as the dynamic duo led to championship success. Like Hernandez, Blanchard could have played a babyface, but seemed born for playing a villain and irked fans as the handsome half-breed, a heel who boasted of his lavish lifestyle, including photos he took with famous starlets at the time. Tully's father, former wrestler turned promoter Joe Blanchard, once noted of Gino, "Gino had a lot of problems. Gino wasn't a bad kid or anything, and this isn't a knock at him, but unselfishness in wrestling is what gets it over." Gino was no stranger to World Class, having worked there in the 70s and early 80s. His 1984 return included a feud against Mike Von Erich. Hernandez added to his heat by introducing his bodyguard Andrea the Giant, aka future Jim Crockett promotion star Baby Doll. Hernandez and Andrea feuded with Mike Von Erich and Sunshine, and occasionally Stella May, Sunshine's aunt. Hernandez's partner, United Kingdom native Chris Adams, was a talented judo practitioner who enjoyed watching professional wrestling and was invited to try his hand at it. Adams began competing in England in the late 1970s and moved to the United States, competing there around 1981. Adams' career skyrocketed when he joined World Class Championship Wrestling in 1983, working as a babyface against the despised Jimmy Garvin. Adams' good looks, English accent, and superkick finisher, which was something new for fans at the time, only added to his popularity. Adams was a hit with fans and became kayfabe friends with the Von Erichs, a certain way of staying near the top, although the top spots were reserved for the Von Erichs. However, bigger things lie ahead, but first, there was the matter of a heel turn. Betrayal. One of the biggest elements of the Von Erichs versus Dynamic Duo feud was the element of betrayal. Betrayal usually makes good fuel for a wrestling feud, and here, Chris Adams' betrayal of his friend Kevin Von Erich led to a bloody and brutal war. World Class was one of the best booked territories at the time, and the story of babyface Chris Adams taking on heel manager Gary Hart played out to perfection. While Adams claimed he was only relying on Hart's vast experience in guiding wrestlers to success, Hart's heel ways seemed to rub off on Adams, as Gentleman Chris superkicked Kevin when Von Erich confronted Gary Hart after a miscommunication that caused Kevin and Chris a tag bout. This led to a match between Chris and Kevin, where Kevin defeated Adams and offered to forgive him for superkicking him if he only fired Hart. Instead, Adams broke a wooden chair over Von Erich in one of the most brutal chair shots ever. Ironically, Adams later fired Hart, claiming his manager had thrown in the towel for him when he was working a match against the Von Erichs. Adams had already been teaming with Hernandez, but the team moved into high gear after Adams fired Hart. Chris and Gino seemed to drive each other to new heights of heeldom, and their combination paid off with many wins. The Dynamic Duo battled many teams in World Class, including the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, Scott Casey and Kabuki, Brian Adias and Iceman Parsons, and even Michael Hayes and Buddy Roberts of the Fabulous Freebirds. However, their most frequent opponents were the Von Erichs. Bad to the bone. Adams and Hernandez occasionally used George Thorogood and the Destroyers' Bad to the Bone as their entrance music, which represented just how hated they had become in World Class. Adams joined Hernandez in portraying a wrestler who enjoyed the good life, whether it was flying in a private jet, surrounding himself with the good-looking women, or riding around in luxury cars. Like any good heel team, they flaunted their lifestyle and made it clear they were better than everyone around them. Considering the team's success, it was often hard to argue against this. Adams and Hernandez dominated the tag team division. The Dynamic Duo were a formidable team in their own right, but they also teamed with Jake the Snake Roberts to win World Class's 6-man tag team championship. At times, it seemed as if no one could stop them. This drove fans to see the many matches booked between the Dynamic Duo and World Class's various babyface teams. Sometimes, fans saw Adams and Hernandez take on two members of the Von Erich family. Other times, they might see one of the Von Erichs team up with a popular secondary babyface, such as Kerry Von Erich and the Great Kabuki, or even Kerry Von Erich and Michael Hayes. During the Birds' babyface run, Adams and Hernandez were crushing it in World Class, and according to Tully Blanchard, there was interest in Hernandez working in Jim Crockett Promotions. Gino, had a tremendous amount of talent. In fact, in early 1984, I called him on the telephone and asked him if he'd come to North Carolina. Crockett wanted to offer him a job. He said, "Nah, I'm having too much fun, and I'm doing this in Dallas." And it wasn't too many months after that he was dead. After a successful match, the Dynamic Duo added a new trick to their act, cutting opponents' hair. This infuriated fans further and had them clamoring even more for someone to make Adams and Hernandez pay. This being World Class, that someone would have to be named Von Erich. Crash and burn. World Class masterfully dialed up the fans' frenzy until it was time for the Blowoff match, a hair versus hair match at World Class's second Cotton Bowl extravaganza show. On October 6, 1985, Kerry and Kevin Von Erich defeated Adams and Hernandez. Despite their best efforts to weasel out of the stipulation, the Dynamic Duo had their heads shaved, leading to them subsequently wearing masks to hide their embarrassment. Like any good heel team, they also used the mask to confuse opponents and the referee, switching places without a tag to ensure a fresh man was always in the ring. However, World Class decided it was time to take Adams and Hernandez in a different direction. The seeds for a feud were sown during a tag team match when Gino refused to tag in, leaving Adams high and dry. This led to a hair versus hair match where Hernandez revisited the classic angle where Freebird hair removal cream was thrown into the junkyard dog's eyes, blinding him, doing the same thing to Adams that Freebird Michael Hayes had done to JYD. Program likely would have been a major one for World Class. A Hernandez-Adams feud, along with a Chris Adams babyface turn, seemed like easy money. Unfortunately, the Grim Reaper stepped in, and world-class fans tuned in to discover that Gino Hernandez was dead. According to an autopsy report, Hernandez died from a cocaine overdose. While there has been speculation that foul play was involved, nothing conclusive has ever been proven. Chris Adams continued wrestling, but his career had peaked. A subsequent in-ring injury slowed his career further, and he opened a wrestling school while also competing. Stone Cold Steve Austin would become Adams' best-known student. Adams' personal demons plagued him throughout his career, leading to his ouster from World Class in 1986. In 2001, Adams was shot and killed by his friend, who was found not guilty in self-defense. In 2001, World Class announcer Bill Mercer commented about Chris Adams. There were a lot of guys you watched then, and he was the one I always thought was going to be as big as anyone could be in wrestling. But I guess he was always in trouble. Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez's run as the dynamic duo was relatively short, but it's still talked about by world-class championship wrestling fans. The team's effectiveness at getting magma hot heel heat, their skills in the ring, and their portrayal of two men living life in the Fastlane are timeless examples of wrestling's ability to both enrage and entertain fans. The 1980s was known as a time of excess. If so, the dynamic duo epitomized the decade's reputation for conspicuous consumption and overindulgence, and the price some people paid for life in the Fastlane. Did you get to see the dynamic duo wrestle? If so, what did you think of them? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.